Welcome to the Tell Me Something Good podcast. Ranked by the International Association of Awesome Podcasts as the best podcast in the history of podcasts. Wait, is that a thing? I don't think that's a thing. Anyway, seeking to shine a light on all that is good in an ever-darkening world of negativity. Here's your host, Clint Swindall.
Hey everybody, I'm Clint Swindall, and this is the Tell Me Something Good podcast, the show that is all about creating a more positive world by overcoming negativity. It is my goal each episode to engage your mind, encourage your heart, or enlighten your soul. I am so happy you're here. This is episode number 18 of the Tell Me Something Good podcast. This one is brought to you by the good folks at Nutty Foods, a family-owned and operated company striving to provide healthier snack options, ones that are approved by moms and loved by kids. Look, we all like a good snack. I may or may not have just had one myself, and we need some snacks that are actually good for us, and Nutty Foods provides just that. They are the home of Chocolata, these crazy good chocolate spreads. They make their products in small batches, and they're dedicated to providing the healthiest and most delicious chocolate spreads available. If you're looking for a healthy, keto-friendly snack option for you and your family, check them out at nuttyfoods.com. Welcome back. It is my hope everybody is staying healthy during these days of the pandemic. We are doing everything possible to stay healthy here. We are washing our hands, wearing masks when in public, and adhering to social distancing guidelines. And I don't know about you, I am ready for this craziness to be over. At some point, I'm going to have to let my wife back in the house.
Yeah!
Actually, she told me if I keep telling people that, she's going to have me sleeping outside. So I'm kissing up and just happy I get to sleep inside. You know, we've talked a lot on this podcast about personal leadership, how we need to focus on leading ourselves past the negativity in our lives. And we'll be talking a lot about that over the life of this podcast because self-leadership is about all you can control. I realize, though, that a big part of the negativity in some people's lives is the way they are led at work. Most of us spend more waking hours at work than we do at home, and how much we enjoy those working hours is directly related to how engaged we are. Our engagement requires two things to happen. Our leaders must do things to build a culture of engagement, and we must do things to contribute to that culture. As much as we'd like, we don't get to show up every morning saying, "Engage me. It's been a long weekend, you better get started." No, we have some work to do as well. As leaders navigate through this pandemic, I want to talk a little about the importance of employee engagement. You see, prior to the pandemic, the focus of my message on a stage speaking, in a training room training, or just writing was employee engagement. During the pandemic, the focus of my message continues to be engagement. And once we get past the pandemic, and we will, the focus of my message will be employee engagement. And why is that? Well, it's simple. Engaged employees are happier and more productive. The best source for measuring employee engagement in the U.S. is the Gallup Organization. When I wrote my first book on employee engagement titled Engaged Leadership, Building a Culture to Overcome Employee Disengagement, the Gallup Organization identified 3 types of employees: engaged, disengaged, and actively disengaged. Back then, 26% of employees were engaged, just 1 in 4. 55% were disengaged, and 19% were actively disengaged, meaning 1 in 5 were trying to tear down the culture of the company that provided them a paycheck. Absolutely amazing. When I wrote the second edition of Engaged Leadership 9 years ago, the numbers improved. That year, the statistics showed 29% of employees were engaged, 54% were disengaged, and 17% were actively disengaged. While they were better, they were nothing to get excited about. Here's what leadership should have gotten very excited about over the past 8 years. The percentage of engaged employees has gone up every single year. It gradually increased to 38% this May.
What?
I know, and right in the middle of the pandemic. Great news, right? Here's where it all changes. The most recent poll by the Gallup Organization for June 2020 shows the most significant drop in employee engagement since 2000. 20 years ago when they first started measuring engagement. Their study now shows the percentage of engaged employees dropped from 38% to 31%. To make it even worse, the largest portion of the percentage drop was among the leaders and managers, meaning the very people who are responsible for maintaining a culture of employee engagement are the ones who have been the most affected by our current situation. So why is that? Perhaps we can dig into that in a future episode. It is certainly something I am working with clients on as they navigate the pandemic. In the meantime, I am more convinced than ever that employee engagement should continue to be the focus. Look, management fads come and go. The past few decades have given us more than we can count. Some never got traction and fizzled out early in the development stages, while others took off and made their way into the hallways of businesses large and small. Many of these innovations in management had great merit. Organizations around the world used programs like management by objectives or core competency, matrix management, Six Sigma, and best practices to enhance methods of management. In fact, elements of each of these programs continue in some form to impact many companies today. The focus of many organizations over the past decade has been employee engagement, as it should have been. There are some people who think employee engagement is yet another fad that has run its course. In fact, while some have called it the management fad of the millennium, others have said it's just rebranding for employee satisfaction. In both cases, they are wrong. Employee engagement is not a program. Employee engagement is the result of a relationship between an organization and its employees. There are many factors that lead to employee engagement, and these factors may be different for different organizations. Regardless of how an organization chooses to approach the engagement of employees, the effort should be treated as an ongoing effort, not as a management fad that has an end to its cycle. As I mentioned, the Gallup Organization every year publishes its findings of employee engagement. While the statistics may vary from year to year, one thing is certain: employee engagement continues to be an issue. Every reputable engagement survey shows that the vast majority of employees are at some level of disengagement. Even at the peak this year of 38%, it still means 62% of employees are not engaged. In most cases, these employees show up to work each day prepared to do the minimum to get by. While the engagement of employees has always been a concern, it is more important than ever for many reasons, including 1, your best employees are making decisions about their future. When unemployment numbers are high, employees have fewer options and tend to stay in an organization just as they are right now. As a result, turnover rates are relatively low. Leaders will often associate low turnover with employee engagement. After all, if employees aren't leaving, we must be doing something right. Wrong. In fact, leaders will often do less to engage employees when they see low turnover rates, which is what we're seeing in the middle of this pandemic. We all know good employees have few options right now. If they aren't engaged in their current environment, they don't have many opportunities to find employment elsewhere. However, this is not a permanent situation. As things get better, new opportunities will present themselves through social media sites like LinkedIn. And when intriguing opportunities present themselves, employees may take the opportunity to consider their own level of engagement and the efforts leaders made during tough times. Without a concentrated effort to engage employees, companies may lose the talent necessary to grow their business. 2, Social media is making your employer brand more transparent. Employee disengagement comes from many places in an organization. Poor leadership, inadequate pay and benefits, lack of direction, and an unfair work environment are just a few. For years, these drivers of disengagement could be hidden from potential recruits. Slick brochures and shiny websites declaring a company is the best place to work has encouraged many employees to come aboard, completely unaware of the dark side of the organization. Today, potential talent is paying more attention to what employees are saying about their company in social media than what the marketing and HR department is saying on a website. If you are cultivating a culture of employee engagement, your employees can be the best advertising for potential new talent. If you aren't, they have a vehicle through social media to discourage the best from becoming a part of your organization. 3. Millennials are less loyal than older generations. The days of employees staying with an organization out of a feeling of loyalty are long gone. At some point in the distant past, there was a reciprocity of loyalty. A company was loyal to employees as long as they were productive and added value to the organization. In turn, employees were loyal to the company. Those days are gone. Since few companies are willing to commit to long-term security for an employee, fewer employees are willing to commit to a company. In essence, both sides settle up every 2 weeks. With a growing number of millennials in the workplace today, key employees are coming from this younger generation. Many organizations are proactively looking for talented millennials. Without a focused effort on employee engagement to keep your best employees, this generation of people willing to find a better opportunity could be the first to go. 4. The demands of employees are evolving. Many older generations worked during a time when the employer called the shots. Employees worked when they were told, where they were told, and how they were told. Those were the days of mediocrity and disengagement. A focus on employee engagement drives leadership to find ways to meet employees where they are today, which in many cases requires a whole different mindset for most leaders. Some people think the younger generation's demand for greater flexibility and creativity has single-handedly changed the workplace. Maybe so. This much I can assure you. The work-from-home requirement resulting from the pandemic is changing the workplace more than people will ever imagine. Corporate culture is changing before our eyes as many leaders are just waiting to get back to normal. Regardless of whether it was the millennials before the pandemic or the pandemic itself, the days of a leader insisting all employees fit within a dated structure are gone. An effort must be made to ensure an organization benefits from the demand for greater flexibility and creativity. Not only will the organization benefit from new ways of working, it'll benefit from more engaged employees. And 5, organizations are becoming more and more complicated. It would be nice if business was simple. We develop a product or service the market needs. We hire good employees who handle the work to deliver the product or service. Our customers tell us we're doing a great job. Employees tell us how happy they are. Payments are made on time, and we take the money to the bank. As simple as that may sound, reality is much different. Instead, the product or service we've developed has unforeseen complications. The employees we hired turned out to not be as good as we thought. Customers aren't happy and tell the world through social media, and we spend way more time tracking down payment than we should. Employees tell us they have more work than they can handle. Managers who were promoted for their technical ability are struggling in a leadership role they don't understand, and the senior leadership is spending most of its time focused on stakeholders and external customers. That description is closer to reality. Sadly, that reality breeds disengagement because we often take our eye off of the employees. At no point in my professional career has that been more obvious than right now in the midst of a global pandemic. With that reality, we must have a laser focus on building a culture of engagement. Good leaders are always searching for ways to enhance corporate culture. It can be confusing to determine the right approach with so many opportunities to follow the next management fad. With the myriad of clickbait teasers claiming to have the best way to enhance your culture and the only thing you'll ever need to become the best boss ever, leaders find themselves jumping from one area of focus to another. There are plenty of statistics that show employee engagement improves productivity, enhances customer satisfaction, lowers absenteeism, and drives employee performance. Don't be fooled into thinking employee engagement is a fad. It's a complex challenge that requires a thoughtful, multifaceted solution. Employee engagement has been a priority over the past 2 decades, and it should continue to be long into the future. Indeed, with all the fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the workplace today, it is more important now than ever.
You're listening to Tell Me Something Good with Clint Swindall.
Back in episode 12, I had my good friend and all-around smart guy Jeff Skelton on the podcast. We spent some time in that episode talking about the impact quotes have in our lives, and we shared some of our favorites with you. Jeff is a good friend, and like me, he's a student of good leadership. We spent some time chatting about the most recent employee engagement findings in the Gallup study. We hit the record button just in case there was something we'd like to include on the podcast, and I'm glad we did. He is working with coworkers and clients every day in his career, so I started by asking him if there is alignment between what the most recent study is showing and what he is seeing in his world. And here's what he had to share.
This is such a great topic, and it's so relevant right now. I see out there that people are just starved for good leadership. They want guidance. They want possibly even just reassurance that everything's going to be okay. I mean, that's where we go. A lot of times we spend a good portion of our time at work with those people, and we sometimes gain validation. We gain all of that type of support in our lives. And if we're not getting good leadership, well, we're just kind of floating out there, right? And we're not even going in every day. We're sitting at home in isolation and on an island. And if folks aren't reaching out with that good leadership, I'm not surprised to hear that engagement's going down. I think initially people were like, this is great. I'm at home. My company gave me a laptop. They gave me everything I need. And that lasted for a while. But now I'm sitting at home and my company hasn't reached out to me in 2 months.
Yep.
And I'm feeling alone and I'm feeling isolated. And I don't know where we're going with what's the direction of the company. Are we going to be fine? Am I going to be laid off? And if leadership is not consciously and proactively, making people feel comfortable or giving them guidance of, hey, here's where we're at in the company. This is what we're doing. This is our mission objective. Here's where we're at. I think people begin to create their own stories of what might be happening. And that's where you start having that downward spiral.
I think the irony is that while they're starving for good leadership right now, they were starving for good leadership before we ever had a pandemic. You're really able to reveal bad leadership in the middle of a pandemic.
That's exactly what happened. In difficult times, it exposes your weakness.
That's right.
Right. And that's in our personal lives, professional lives. And when the numbers are great, nobody's digging into your productivity. When the numbers are great, they're not worried about whether you worked a full day or did you return those calls, because everyone's, as I say, everyone's fat and happy. The numbers are coming in, everybody's fine. But as soon as it starts getting difficult and you start getting into the weeds of the business, now it's exposed. Yeah. And the same thing with people's well-being. I love the fact that when there's companies that really pay attention to the emotional well-being of their employees, which is really what great leadership is going to do. It's going to give you guidance. It's going to give you that reassurance. And people are better when their emotional well-being is in a better place. Their productivity is up. It's all tied together.
You bet.
And you just see sometimes when you get ignored, absence of leadership, which can sometimes even be, in my opinion, worse than bad leadership. At least bad leadership, you know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But it's when there's no sail on this boat and you're just drifting out there. That's sometimes even worse.
And Jeff, sometimes I wonder, as we go through this pandemic and trying to figure out why some people are so disengaged, I think it might actually be one of two things. Either one, what you were talking about, and that is, I have a leader that hasn't communicated with me. I don't know, I haven't heard from my CEO. I haven't heard from senior leadership. And I'm lost. The fear, uncertainty, and doubt is overwhelming, and I'm not getting any leadership. Therefore, I have become more disengaged. I think that's one part. I think another part of that is overconfidence of some leaders thinking they have the answers and they're communicating that. Don't anybody worry. We've got this figured out. This is what we're going to do. This is how. How do you know that? You have no idea. You've never been in a pandemic. You are as uncertain as we are. I think sometimes the overconfidence of leadership can cause people to be disengaged too, rather than just being transparent and saying, you know what? We really don't know how this thing is going to come out, but together
Right.
we will figure this thing out. And I need you to be fully engaged and help us to do that.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I work with a lot of organizations on how to help navigate through this and support their employees. And it's interesting. A lot of them will ask me a question, well, Jeff, what are you seeing as best practices out there? And I'm very transparent with them. There are no best practices.
Right.
Like, by the way, what was true last week is no longer true. And what we decide to do this week will change, quite possibly will change next week.
That's right.
But the difference is, can we pivot? And I personally think that's one of the things a great leader does, is based on all the information I have today, this is what we're going to do. But be prepared next week to go, okay, new information, new course of action.
Yep.
And then communicate that. Because that is what's happening right now. Things are changing. It's a very fluid dynamic out there. And I think that's what people want to know is, are we moving in the right direction? Is this still the game plan? And it is the game plan until we change the game plan, which we're seeing happen on a regular basis.
Absolutely. One of the things that was probably the scariest for me, Jeff, in that study that just came out by the Gallup Organization is not just that engagement dropped from 38% in May to 31% in June. I mean, that 7-point drop is just absolutely enormous. The most concerning thing for me is that the biggest percentage of that 7% drop were the leaders and the managers who were included in that poll. So it's not just the regular Joe and Susie who are sitting at home trying to manage their life. They've got a headset on. They're trying to manage their customer service job from the corner of their living room while their dogs and children are running around. It's not even those people.
Right.
It's not even the ones who aren't hearing from their leadership that had the greatest drop. It's the very people who companies are depending on to lead them through the pandemic and to build that culture of engagement. Those people made up the largest drop in that percentage. That is a frightening thought.
I am not surprised to hear that, but I'm curious. Well, why do you think that is?
Two things. One, I think that leadership truly has dropped the ball in communicating to them what they should be communicating down to the next level. People in the middle feel an obligation to give accurate information to the people on the front line.
Yeah, it's a great point.
I also believe that, number two, leaders are so spread out in their focus. They're trying to focus on diversity. They're trying to focus on inclusiveness. They're trying to focus on education of their employees around those issues, because those are the priority right now, and there needs to be a lot of effort put on that. But as a result, we take our eye off the ball of performance, of recognition, and of all the other things that leaders at that middle level would normally be doing. Well, they're having to refocus their attention on these other things. And those that are the most engaged, they're the ones that are saying, well, I'm not getting my pats on the back. I'm not getting my recognition. I'm not being told I'm a star.
That's right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's, I work with the groups, and we always take a look at many of the different services. Are they nice to haves or must haves?
Yep.
And it's so interesting how many of the things that today in a crisis situation are must haves, they were always nice to haves, and therefore they never got the attention, as you're saying.
Yeah.
And now they're exposed.
Yeah.
The companies that were battle ready because they made these things important. I'll tell you kind of a parallel path. We see this with emotional well-being and EAP services. Companies always said, yeah, we'd like to have a really good EAP to make sure we're there to emotionally support our employees. But they were always nice to haves.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they went, oh, we got caught behind the 8 ball here, and we really need to get this implemented because the emotional well-being of our employees are struggling right now. They're suffering, and we don't have a good solution because we never made it a priority before.
Yep.
And now they are. And so you think about these companies that were doing those things. They were recognizing employees. They were rewarding them. They were giving them the pat on the backs. They were educating. They were personal development was available to them. Well, now when things get difficult, that group's battle ready. And it matters. It's interesting, how easily you can recognize these. A very good friend of mine, coincidentally out here in California, he's been in the banking and lending business for many, many years. And he was recruited and went to this new organization. And after a few months there, he says, Jeff, this company I'm with is fantastic. The CEO is amazing. And he starts lining out these things, and his supervisor, the way they take care of their people. And he's like, this is amazing. And Clint, I don't know if you remember this, but I called you up and said, Clint, you got to take a look at this company. They are nailing it on leadership. And I got a good chuckle when you said, yeah, they've been a client for 5 years, because they've been paying attention to this. This is what they do. It wasn't an accident. They didn't accidentally get this. They have been working at this. And so when it gets in times of this, where in this particular case, because I've talked to this person, where employees are working from home, they are just like everybody else, but they are in a better position for it, because they were taking care of their people way before this type of situation.
Well, Jeff, man, every time I talk to you, it's like a little slice of heaven, man. I learn a little something. I enjoy good conversation, and I appreciate you coming on and hanging out on the show today. And I look forward to more of these.
Definitely. I love sharing the time with you, and look forward to next time we can get together.
I always feel energized after I spend some time chatting with a friend. It's one of the things we all can use during these days of the pandemic. All right, everybody, we are about to wrap up. Before I end this episode with a challenge, I want to remind you that this episode of Tell Me Something Good has been brought to you by Nutty Foods, a family-owned and operated company striving to provide healthier snack options, ones that are approved by moms and loved by kids. Nutty Foods is the home of Chocolata, these crazy good chocolate spreads. They make their products in small batches, and they're dedicated to providing the healthiest and most delicious chocolate spreads available. If you're looking for a healthy, keto-friendly snack option for you and your family, check them out at nuttyfoods.com. And now the challenge. Before you come back for the next episode, I challenge you to consider how you are leading others in your life, either professionally or personally. While we can use employee engagement as a measure to determine how enthusiastic and committed someone is to their employer, we need to be considering how enthusiastic and committed someone is to our relationship. Whether it's your family or your friends, where would they fall if we created a loved ones engagement tool to measure how well you are providing leadership in your personal life? Would they be engaged, enthusiastic and committed, ready to go above and beyond to contribute to the relationship? Would they be disengaged, just showing up because they are expected, doing the bare minimum to make things work? Or would they be actively disengaged, proactively trying to tear down the relationship, looking for every flaw they can find? Just like it is with employees, sometimes the cause of a person's disengagement is within themselves. They are simply angry and bitter. And sometimes the cause of their disengagement is the way they are being led. Do me a favor. Think about the top 2 people you lead in your life, and ask yourself if you are leading them in a way that gets them enthusiastic and supportive of your relationship. Well, that's all for today's episode of the Tell Me Something Good podcast. I sure hope you'll join us again next week. In the meantime, be listening for our special episode of Champagne Friday each Friday morning. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. If you're liking the podcast, do me a favor and leave me a rating and review. By doing that, you're providing the social proof some people are looking for when deciding where they'll invest their time listening to a podcast. If you have a question for the podcast, if you want to share your good stuff, or you just need to find the links to join us on social media, jump over to findthegoodinlife.com. You'll find all you need right there on the front page. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'll be praying for God to bless you in mighty ways. Now, get out there and love on somebody.
You've been listening to the Tell Me Something Good podcast. The content of the podcast is meant to engage, encourage, and enlighten you to become more positive. It's not meant to diagnose, treat, or replace the personalized care provided by a trained professional. If you're struggling with depression or mental health issues, please reach out to a counselor for diagnosis and treatment. Until next time, be positive, people.